The Absent Deed, Chapter 1, The Cold Shock of Reality. Portland, Oregon, 2025. The fluorescent lights of St. Jude's Hospital hummed with a sterile, relentless energy. A stark contrast to the soft, natural light that usually filtered into Eleanor Vance's cozy craftsman home. For 3 months, Eleanor, a spirited 72-year-old retired librarian, had been confined to a hospital bed, battling a severe, unexpected bout of pneumonia that had quickly escalated, threatening to claim her life. Her world had shrunk to the rhythmic beeping of machines, the hushed whispers of nurses, and the blurry, fleeting visits from her daughter Clara. Clara, her only child, a sharp, ambitious real estate agent, had been a constant, if somewhat distant, presence. She brought Eleanor flowers, read her snippets from the local newspaper, and assured her repeatedly that everything was being handled. Eleanor, weak and often disoriented by medication, clung to Clara's reassurances like a lifeline. Clara was her rock, her link to the outside world, the one managing her affairs while Eleanor fought for every breath. Eleanor's most cherished possession was her home, a small, 2-story house nestled on a tree-lined street in southeast Portland. It was more than just bricks and mortar. It was the repository of a lifetime of memories. Raising Clara there, the scent of baking bread, the laughter of grandchildren during holidays, the quiet solace of her garden, meticulously tended for over 40 years. It was her sanctuary, her legacy, her anchor in a rapidly changing world. She had paid off the mortgage years ago, a point of immense pride. One crisp autumn morning, the doctor delivered the news Eleanor had desperately longed for. "You're recovering, Eleanor. Slow but steady. We think you'll be ready for discharge by the end of next week. You'll need home care, of course, but the worst is over." A wave of profound relief washed over Eleanor. Home. Her home. The thought of her own bed, her sunlit kitchen, her quiet garden, filled her with a joyful anticipation she hadn't felt in months. She immediately called Clara, her voice hoarse but filled with a new vitality. "Clara, darling, they're discharging me next week. Isn't that wonderful? I can't wait to be home. I've missed it so much." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. A pause that stretched, taut and unsettling. "Oh," Clara finally said, her voice unusually flat, devoid of the usual bright enthusiasm. That's wonderful, Mom." Eleanor frowned. "You don't sound very excited, dear. Is something wrong?" "No, Mom, not at all," Clara replied, a forced lightness returning to her tone. "It's just a lot to arrange. Home care, adjustments. Don't you worry about a thing. I'll take care of everything, just like I said." The conversation ended quickly, Clara citing a busy schedule. Eleanor dismissed the oddness. Clara was always busy. She was a successful real estate agent, constantly juggling clients and properties. Eleanor had always admired her daughter's drive, her sharp business acumen. She simply felt a twinge of disappointment that Clara didn't share her immediate elation. The following week, Eleanor meticulously packed her few hospital belongings, her heart soaring with anticipation. A nurse helped her dress. Chatting cheerfully about the joys of returning home, Eleanor pictured her favorite armchair, the warmth of the afternoon sun on her face, the gentle scent of her hydrangeas from the garden. Clara arrived to pick her up, but something was off. Clara avoided Eleanor's gaze, her movements stiff, her usual easy smile replaced by a tight, unreadable expression. She brought Eleanor's suitcase, but no flowers, no celebratory gesture. As they drove out of the hospital parking lot, Eleanor realized Clara wasn't taking the familiar route to her house. "Clara, dear, where are we going? This isn't the way home." Clara gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white. She took a deep, shaky breath. "Mom," she began, her voice barely a whisper, strained with an emotion Eleanor couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Guilt? "Mom, there's something I need to tell you. Something important." Eleanor's blood ran cold. The tone, the fear in Clara's voice. "What is it, Clara? What's wrong? Is it the house? Did something happen to the garden?" 1,000 anxieties, big and small, flooded her mind. Clara pulled the car over to the side of the road, under the shade of a large, old maple tree. She turned off the engine. The sudden silence in the car was deafening, amplifying the frantic pounding of Eleanor's heart. Clara turned to face her, her eyes wide, glistening with unshed tears. "Mom," Clara finally said, her voice breaking, "while you were in the hospital, while you were so sick, I had to make some very difficult decisions for your financial well-being, for your future." She took another shaky breath. "Mom, I sold the house." Eleanor stared at her daughter. The words hung in the air, surreal, impossible. Sold the house. Her sanctuary, the repository of her entire life. It couldn't be. "What?" Eleanor whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "Sold my house? Clara, what are you talking about? My house is paid for. I don't need money." "What? What have you done?" Clara's tears began to fall freely. "Mom, you were so sick. The medical bills were astronomical. The hospital stays, the treatments, and your recovery would be long. I thought it was the only way. To protect you. To ensure you had enough funds for long-term care, for everything you would need. I had power of attorney. I thought I was doing what was best. I truly did." Eleanor felt the world tilt. The carefully constructed piece of her recovery shattered into a million pieces. The house, gone, sold, without her knowledge, without her consent, while she lay helpless, fighting for her life. The magnitude of the betrayal, the audacity of the act, hit her with a physical force. She, Eleanor Vance, the meticulous librarian, the careful planner, the woman who valued her independence above all else, was now homeless, displaced. And it was her own daughter, her flesh and blood, who had done it. "You sold my house?" Eleanor repeated, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Her voice, once weak, now vibrated with a cold, terrifying anger she hadn't known she possessed. "My home? Without even asking me? While I was fighting for my life? How could you, Clara? How could you do this to me?" Clara tried to reach for her hand, her face a mask of grief and remorse. "Mom, please, try to understand. It was for you. I was terrified I would lose you, and that you would be left with crushing debt. I thought I was protecting you." But Eleanor pulled her hand away, recoiling as if from a viper. The words, "protecting you," sounded like a cruel mockery. A profound bone-deep sense of betrayal, colder and more shocking than any medical diagnosis, enveloped her. The cold shock of reality had truly set in. Her home was gone, and her daughter, her only child, had taken it from her. The absent deed, the deed of her property, was now signed away, and with it, her sense of security, her trust, her very identity. Chapter 2. The Silent Walls of Betrayal. The immediate aftermath of Clara's confession was a terrifying blur of shock and disbelief for Eleanor. She found herself not being driven to her beloved home, but to a small, unfamiliar apartment. A a short-term rental Clara had secured, furnished with generic, unfeeling pieces. It was clean, functional, but utterly devoid of Eleanor's life, her scent, her memories. It was a temporary space, a holding cell, not a home. Eleanor was too weak to fight, too emotionally shattered to argue. She moved through the motions of settling into the sterile apartment, her mind reeling, grappling with the enormity of the betrayal. Her house, gone, sold. The words were a constant, tormenting echo. She felt like a phantom, untethered, floating in an alien landscape. Clara, though visibly distressed, continued to insist it was for Eleanor's financial well-being. She presented a thick stack of medical bills, detailed spreadsheets, legal documents outlining the power of attorney. Eleanor, an archivist by nature, would normally scrutinize every line, every figure. But now, her mind felt clouded, unable to focus. The numbers blurred. The legal jargon sounded like a foreign language. All she could comprehend was the cold, hard fact. Her home was gone. "Mom, look," Clara pleaded, her voice strained with desperation. "The hospital bills alone. They were over $100,000. And the long-term care, the physical therapy you'll need, that's another $70,000 easily. The house was paid off, yes, but it was sitting equity. This money, it protects you from bankruptcy. It protects your future." Eleanor listened, numb. The logical part of her brain, the part that had managed budgets and retirement plans meticulously for decades, understood the figures. But the emotional part, the heart that had poured love and life into every corner of her home, screamed in protest. How could a house, a home, be reduced to mere equity? How could her future be protected by erasing her past, by stripping her of her sanctuary? "You could have asked me, Clara," Eleanor whispered, her voice devoid of anger, now only a profound, heartbreaking sorrow. "You could have waited. You could have told me. I would have found a way. I would have sold a kidney before I sold my home." Clara flinched, tears welling in her eyes. "Mom, you were in an induced coma for weeks. You were barely conscious. The doctor said, they said it was touch and go. I didn't know if you'd even wake up. I had to act fast. There were immediate needs for funds. I truly believed I was acting in your best interest." Eleanor closed her eyes, the image of Clara's frantic, desperate face flickering behind her eyelids. She knew Clara loved her. She knew Clara was driven, perhaps to a fault, by a desire to be competent, to solve problems, to protect. But this felt like an overreach, a violation of the most sacred trust. Clara had acted, not just without her consent, but with an inherent assumption that Eleanor, once gravely ill, was no longer capable of making her own decisions, no longer possessed agency over her own life, over her own home. Days bled into weeks. Eleanor navigated the new, unfamiliar apartment, her every movement a stark reminder of her displacement. The silence in the temporary walls felt deafening, a constant echo of the betrayal. She missed the creaks of her old floorboards, the way the light fell through her kitchen window in the mornings, the scent of her rose garden drifting through the open window. She missed the very feel of her home, the subtle vibrations of a place deeply lived in. She found herself frequently checking her purse, clutching the small metal key to her old house. It was a foolish, desperate habit. The key was useless now, a relic of a life she no longer possessed. Yet she couldn't bring herself to part with it. It was a tangible link to what she had lost, a cold, hard reminder of the absent deed. One afternoon, a package arrived for Eleanor. It was from a law firm she didn't recognize. Inside, a formal letter stating that as the former owner of 147 Maple Street, she was due a final, small refund from a prorated utility bill. Enclosed was a check for $37.42, and with it, a copy of the deed of sale. Eleanor's hands trembled as she pulled out the crisp white document, the legal language blurred. But two things stood out in stark, agonizing clarity. Her own signature, seemingly valid, obtained under the power of attorney Clara had held, and the date, 2 weeks into her hospitalization, while she was still heavily sedated, barely clinging to life. And then the buyer's name, bold, clear, stamped on the deed. Willow Creek Properties, LLC. A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. Willow Creek Properties. She knew that name. Clara had talked about them recently. A large, aggressive development company known for buying up older properties in desirable Portland neighborhoods, tearing them down and building modern, soulless townhouses. Clara had even mentioned working on a few deals with them. She had always spoke of them with a mixture of professional admiration and a slight, almost imperceptible disdain for their ruthless tactics. A cold, creeping suspicion began to solidify in Eleanor's mind. If the sale was for her financial well-being, why sell it to a developer known for quick, cash deals, often at below-market value, to expedite demolition? Why not explore other options? Why not sell it to a family, someone who would cherish the home, or at least respect its history? Eleanor, despite her emotional turmoil, felt her archivist's mind, her meticulous nature, begin to stir. This was not adding up. The numbers Clara had presented, the urgency, the buyer. Something felt wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong. The silent walls of betrayal around her apartment suddenly felt less like a consequence of desperate love and more like a carefully constructed prison of secrets. The absent deed, now in her hands, was not just a symbol of loss, but a document of a potentially deeper deception, one that chilled her to the bone. Chapter 3. The Whispers of Paper Trails. The deed of sale with the name Willow Creek Properties, LLC, burned in Eleanor's hands. Her librarian's instinct, her archivist's meticulous mind, finally kicked into full gear, overriding the numbing fog of grief and betrayal. She might be physically weak, displaced, and profoundly hurt, but her intellectual faculties were sharp, honed by decades of sifting through information, identifying patterns, and unearthing hidden truths. Clara had said the sale was for astronomical medical bills, but Eleanor knew her insurance coverage was robust. Her retirement savings, meticulously built over a lifetime of careful planning, were substantial. Her house was paid off. She had always prided herself on her financial independence. She had a comfortable nest egg, more than enough to cover any deductibles or copays, even for extended hospital stays. The numbers Clara presented to her, the spreadsheets, the bills. Eleanor suddenly realized she had barely looked at them, accepting them as irrefutable proof of her daughter's desperate, loving sacrifice. Now, a cold, hard skepticism set in. She started with her medical bills. She called her insurance company. To her surprise, a large portion of her hospital stay and treatment had been fully covered as per her premium plan. There were, of course, co-pays and out-of-pocket maximums, but the grand total Eleanor was personally responsible for was a fraction of the astronomical figures Clara had quoted. Nowhere near a sum that would necessitate the forced sale of her home. Eleanor then contacted her bank, her investment advisor. Her savings accounts were intact. Her investment portfolio, though slightly down due to market fluctuations, was still robust. There was no financial distress, no looming bankruptcy, no urgent need for the sudden liquidation of her most significant asset. A chilling realization began to dawn on Eleanor. The narrative Clara had spun, of desperate measures to save her mother from ruin, was collapsing under the weight of easily verifiable facts. The why of the sale was not adding up. Her thoughts turned to Willow Creek Properties, LLC. Clara, a real estate agent, specialized in residential sales, particularly in older, desirable neighborhoods, like Eleanor's. She knew the market, the developers, the players. It was unusual for an agent to sell her own mother's house to a notorious tear-down developer, especially one known for aggressive tactics and sometimes less than market value offers in exchange for quick cash transactions. Eleanor, sitting in her temporary, soulless apartment, began her own investigation. She used her old librarian skills, the ones that made her a master of information retrieval. She still had access to professional databases, albeit from her laptop now. She started by researching Willow Creek Properties, LLC, their public records, their registered agents, their past acquisitions. It was painstaking work, but Eleanor was driven by a fierce, almost vengeful determination. She found a pattern. Willow Creek Properties frequently purchased properties through a specific, small, independent real estate firm. Not Clara's large, reputable agency, but a smaller, less visible one. And that small firm often employed independent agents. Agents who might not be under the same level of scrutiny as those in larger, more established companies. She dug deeper into Clara's professional history. Clara had been steadily rising in her career, but Eleanor knew her daughter had always harbored ambitions far beyond her current firm. She wanted to open her own agency, to be her own boss, to build an empire. She had often complained about the limitations, the old guard at her current company. Then Eleanor found it. A public record, a recent business registration, Vance Real Estate Group, LLC, registered agent, Clara Eleanor Vance, and the date of registration, just 2 weeks after Eleanor had been admitted to the hospital. A month before the sale of Eleanor's house, the pieces clicked into place with horrifying precision. Clara hadn't just sold Eleanor's house. She had used the power of attorney to sell her mother's most valuable asset to a developer known for quick cash deals, and she had done it just as she was setting up her own new business. Financial well-being of Eleanor was a facade. The real motive, the chilling truth that now solidified in Eleanor's heart, was something far more selfish, far more audacious. Clara had sold her mother's home, not to save her from destitution, but to fund her own ambition, to provide the seed money, the capital for her new real estate venture. The whispers of paper trails now screamed betrayal. Clara had used her mother's illness, her helplessness, her trust, as a means to her own end. The absent deed wasn't just a document of loss. It was a testament to a profound, calculated deception, a shocking act of filial theft. Eleanor felt a cold, hard knot of anger tighten in her stomach. Her own daughter, her only child. She hadn't just lost her home. She had lost her belief in Clara, in the very foundation of their relationship. The silent walls of her temporary apartment now felt like the echoes of a daughter's chilling silence, a carefully constructed illusion of care that hid a devastating truth. Chapter 4. the unraveling thread. Eleanor sat at her temporary desk, the business registration for Vance Real Estate Group LLC staring back at her from the laptop screen. Her hands, which once meticulously organized library shelves, now trembled with a mix of fury and heartbroken disbelief. Clara. Her Clara. The ambition Eleanor had always admired now seemed a monstrous, consuming force that had devoured her home, her trust, her very sense of security. She recalled Clara's constant complaints about wanting more freedom, more capital, to break free from her current firm. Eleanor had always offered words of encouragement, even some small financial gifts to help Clara with initial business costs. But Clara had chosen a different path, a path of profound betrayal. The details of the house sale began to take on a darker hue. The rushed nature of the sale, the choice of a developer known for quick, clean demolitions. It was all designed to minimize scrutiny, to ensure a swift transaction before Eleanor recovered, before she could ask questions. Eleanor knew she had to confront Clara, but she needed to be strategic. She was still recovering, still frail. She couldn't afford to be dismissed, to be gaslit, to be overwhelmed by Clara's tears and manufactured justifications. She needed undeniable proof, a clear case that would stand up to scrutiny. She contacted a trusted friend, Martha, a retired lawyer who had always admired Eleanor's sharp mind. Martha listened in stunned silence as Eleanor laid out the facts, the fabricated medical costs, the ample savings, the timing of Clara's business registration, the choice of the developer, the power of attorney used while Eleanor was incapacitated. "Eleanor," Martha said, her voice grave, "this is serious. This is not just a breach of trust. This is potentially elder abuse, financial fraud. Using a power of attorney for personal gain, especially when the principal is incapacitated, that's a criminal offense." Eleanor felt a chill. Criminal. Her own daughter. The word hung in the air, heavy and repugnant. But the truth was undeniable. "I need to recover my home, Martha," Eleanor stated, her voice firm, resolute. "At the very least, I need justice. I need Clara to face the consequences of what she has done, not just for me, but for anyone else she might think of doing this to." Martha agreed to help, meticulously reviewing all the documents Eleanor had gathered: the deed, the medical bills, the business registration. The case, though heartbreaking, was surprisingly strong. Clara's actions were clearly documented, a meticulously built paper trail of her deception. The next few weeks were excruciating. Eleanor maintained a fragile facade of normalcy with Clara, allowing her daughter to continue assisting with her recovery, bringing groceries, offering perfunctory reassurances. Eleanor watched her, scrutinizing every gesture, every word, searching for a flicker of genuine remorse, a hint of the person she thought she knew. But all she saw was a guarded professionalism, an almost rehearsed demeanor. One afternoon, Clara brought over some old photographs, trying to cheer Eleanor up. "Look, Mom, remember this one? Me, on my first day of kindergarten? You always said I was so excited to go off and build my own world." Eleanor looked at the photo, a wistful smile on her face. "You certainly were, Clara, always so determined, so ambitious." Her words were layered with a quiet irony that Clara, absorbed in her own self-justification, completely missed. The internal conflict raged within Eleanor. How could she betray her own daughter, the child she had loved and nurtured her entire life? But how could she not act when her fundamental trust had been so brutally shattered, her security so ruthlessly stripped away? The thought of Clara, living in the comfort of a new business, funded by the sale of Eleanor's sanctuary, while Eleanor languished in a temporary apartment, was unbearable. The very idea of absent deed, a deed that should have guaranteed her peace, now symbolized her profound sense of homelessness. The day came for the confrontation. Martha advised Eleanor to have a witness present and suggested a formal setting. Eleanor chose her living room, a space she had transformed into a temporary command center, filled with files and documents. She invited Clara, ostensibly for a family discussion about her long-term care plans. Clara arrived, looking polished and self-assured. She sat opposite Eleanor, ready to discuss financial arrangements, perhaps even subtly push for a move to an assisted living facility. Eleanor took a deep breath. She had rehearsed this moment countless times. She began calmly, methodically, laying out the facts, presenting the documents, the actual medical bills, the bank statements, the business registration for Vance Real Estate Group LLC, dated before the house sale. Clara's composure slowly began to unravel. Her eyes widened, her face paled. "Mom, what is this? Where did you get these?" Her voice was thin, reedy. "From the paper trail, Clara," Eleanor said, her voice steady, cold. "The same paper trail you thought you could hide from your incapacitated mother. The same paper trail that shows you sold my home, not to save me from financial ruin, but to fund your own ambitious venture. Tell me, Clara, how much of the sale price went directly into Vance Real Estate Group? How much of my equity became your startup capital?" Clara sprang to her feet, her face contorted, a mask of fury and shame. "How dare you, Mom? How dare you accuse me of such a thing? I was protecting you. I sacrificed everything. I worked tirelessly. You were dying, Mom. Dying. I had to act." Her voice rose to a shrill crescendo, tears streaming down her face. "No, Clara," Eleanor said, her voice sharp, cutting through Clara's frantic cries. "You were building your empire. You were using my helplessness as an opportunity. You betrayed me, Clara. You stole my home. You broke my trust." The words hung in the air, a devastating silence filling the room. Clara stared at her mother, her face a mixture of rage, hurt, and profound, undeniable guilt. The carefully constructed facade of the dutiful daughter had shattered, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. The unraveling thread of deception had finally reached its end, leaving Eleanor not with satisfaction, but with a profound, aching sorrow for the daughter she now realized she barely knew, a stranger capable of such a cold, calculating betrayal. The absent deed was not just a missing document. It was a testament to the gaping hole in her heart, a hole torn open by the actions of her own flesh and blood. Chapter 5: The Aftermath of Truth. The confrontation with Clara left Eleanor emotionally drained, but resolute. Clara, after her initial outburst, fled the apartment, leaving Eleanor with the chilling silence of their shattered relationship. Eleanor knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that their bond was irrevocably broken. The daughter she had known, the daughter she had loved unconditionally, was gone, replaced by a stranger capable of such calculated deception. Eleanor and Martha immediately began the legal process. They filed a formal complaint with the district attorney's office, detailing the fraudulent use of the power of attorney. They also initiated a civil lawsuit to reclaim the value of Eleanor's home, or, failing that, the equivalent in damages. It was a daunting, emotionally taxing battle, but Eleanor was determined. This wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about justice, about holding Clara accountable, about ensuring that such a betrayal did not go unchallenged. The news of the lawsuit spread quickly through their small social circle in Portland. Friends and neighbors, initially offering condolences for Eleanor's illness, now whispered with a mix of shock and sympathy. Some rallied around Eleanor, offering support and practical help. Others, knowing Clara's reputation as a rising real estate star, were incredulous, unable to believe such a brazen act of betrayal could come from Eleanor's own daughter. The scandal touched their tightly knit community, exposing the raw underbelly of ambition and desperation. Clara, facing public scrutiny and legal action, hired a high-powered defense attorney. She maintained her innocence, claiming she had acted solely out of concern for her mother's welfare. Her lawyer presented a narrative of a devoted daughter making tough choices under immense pressure, exaggerating Eleanor's financial vulnerability to paint a picture of dire necessity. The legal battle promised to be protracted and ugly. Eleanor, despite her inner turmoil, found a strange sense of empowerment in her fight. She became meticulously organized, gathering every document, every email, every financial record. She consulted with experts, cross-referenced data, and built her case with the precision of an architect designing a skyscraper. Her decades as a librarian, her innate ability to trace paper trails and identify anomalies, served her well. She was no longer just a victim. She was a formidable adversary, armed with truth and unwavering resolve. The thought of Clara, her own child, potentially facing criminal charges, sent a wave of nausea through Eleanor. There were moments of agonizing doubt, of wishing she could retract it all, to simply walk away from the pain. But then she remembered the apartment, cold and impersonal, the absence of her garden, the memories she had built into every corner of her home. And she remembered the feeling of betrayal, the utter violation of trust. No, she could not walk away. During the discovery phase of the lawsuit, Martha uncovered a crucial piece of evidence: a series of emails between Clara and the principal of Willow Creek Properties, LLC. These emails, dated months before Eleanor's hospitalization, discussed potential property acquisitions in Eleanor's neighborhood, specifically mentioning older, paid-off homes as prime targets for quick, quiet purchases and demolition. One email, sent from Clara's personal account to the developer, explicitly mentioned Eleanor's address. "My mother's property at 147 Maple Street would be an ideal acquisition for your next development, once she is no longer a factor." Once she is no longer a factor. The words chilled Eleanor to the bone. It wasn't a desperate act under duress. It was a premeditated plan. Clara had been eyeing her home, planning its sale, long before Eleanor fell ill. Her mother's severe illness had simply provided the opportune, convenient window. This evidence, irrefutable and damning, shattered any lingering doubt Eleanor had about Clara's motives. The remorse Clara had feigned, the tears she had shed, they were a performance, a desperate attempt to manipulate, to avoid accountability. The depth of the calculation, the coldness of the scheme, was almost unimaginable. Her daughter, her own flesh and blood, had seen her not as a beloved mother, but as an obstacle, a property to be liquidated, a means to an ambitious end. The absent deed wasn't just a document of theft, it was a blueprint of premeditated malice, a chilling testament to the utter corruption of trust. Armed with this irrefutable proof, Martha presented the case to Clara's legal team. The defense, once confident, began to crumble. The emails were a smoking gun, undermining Clara's entire narrative of filial devotion and desperate necessity. The outcome was swift and devastating for Clara. Facing overwhelming evidence and the threat of criminal prosecution, she agreed to a settlement. She was forced to dissolve Vance Real Estate Group, LLC. She had to pay Eleanor the full market value of her house, plus additional damages, effectively stripping her of all her initial capital and crippling her career. The public scandal ruined her reputation in the Portland real estate market. She avoided jail time, but her professional life, her ambitious dreams, were utterly shattered. Eleanor received a substantial financial settlement, enough to buy a new, smaller home and provide for her long-term care needs. But the victory felt hollow. She had her financial security back. She had justice, but she had lost her home. And far more profoundly, she had lost her daughter. Clara vanished from her life, cutting off all contact, disappearing into the vast, anonymous landscape of regret and shattered ambition. Eleanor moved into a charming, modest bungalow in a different part of Portland. It was a lovely house, filled with light, with a small, manageable garden. She furnished it with cherished pieces from her old home that Clara had managed to store, the pieces of a life carefully reassembled. She began to create new memories within its walls, planting new roses, finding comfort in the quiet rhythm of her recovery. But the emotional scars remained. The absence of Clara, her only child, was a gaping wound that time, perhaps, would never fully heal. She had won the battle, but lost the war for her family. The house was gone. The absent deed was a ghost, a reminder of the ultimate betrayal. Eleanor, now residing in her new home, knew that some wounds, though patched, forever altered the landscape of the heart, leaving behind a profound and lingering emptiness where a daughter's love once resided. The silence that now filled her new home was not just the absence of her old life. It was the chilling, omnipresent absence of the bond she had shared with her only child. Chapter 6. The Unseen Costs. Eleanor's new bungalow became her sanctuary, a place where she slowly rebuilt her life after the seismic shock of Clara's betrayal. The financial settlement provided a comfortable cushion, allowing her to live without worry, to hire the home care she needed, and to indulge in her love for books and her garden. She made new friends in her new neighborhood, a quieter, more intimate community. She spent hours in her small garden, coaxing new life from the soil, finding solace in the predictable rhythm of nature. Yet despite the renewed sense of security and the quiet beauty of her surroundings, the unseen costs of Clara's actions lingered, deeply embedded in Eleanor's heart. The trust, once an unwavering cornerstone of her relationship with her daughter, had been utterly shattered. It wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a wound that affected her ability to fully trust anyone, to open herself completely to new relationships, to embrace the world with the same innocent optimism she once possessed. Eleanor found herself constantly replaying conversations with Clara, scrutinizing past interactions for missed clues, for signs of the ambition that had warped into such cold calculation. She questioned her own judgment as a mother. Had she been too trusting? Too naive? Had she somehow fostered this unchecked ambition in Clara, unknowingly creating the very monster that would devour her home? These questions haunted her quiet moments, casting a long, introspective shadow. The absence of Clara was a physical ache. Eleanor was an only child herself, and Clara had been her entire world. The thought of holidays, birthdays, quiet Sunday afternoons, all of it now empty of her daughter's presence, filled her with a profound, aching loneliness. The legal victory, the financial restitution, felt like cold comfort when weighed against the irreparable severance of the most fundamental bond in her life. She had gained justice, but lost her child. Friends tried to bridge the gap. Clara is hurting too, Eleanor, some would say, attempting to explain Clara's actions as a desperate error, a moment of weakness. Perhaps one day she'll come back, apologize. But Eleanor knew the depth of the premeditation, the chilling calculation revealed in those emails. There was no simple apology that could mend a wound so deep. Forgiveness felt like an impossible summit to scale. Eleanor filled her days with purpose. She volunteered at the local community library, returning to the world of books and knowledge that had always been her comfort. She found immense satisfaction in helping others, in sharing her wisdom, in feeling useful and valued. She joined a book club, started a gardening group. She built a new life, brick by emotional brick, proving to herself that she was resilient, capable, and far more than just a victim of betrayal. But late at night, in the quiet solitude of her new bungalow, Eleanor would sometimes find herself clutching the old, useless key to her previous home, the one she had kept hidden in a drawer. It was a tangible reminder of the absent deed, of the ghost of her former life. She would trace its cold metal, remembering the warmth of her old house, the scent of her rose garden, the laughter that had once filled its rooms. The physical loss, though painful, was overshadowed by the profound, aching absence of her daughter, a void that no amount of material comfort or new friendships could ever truly fill. She often wondered about Clara. Where was she? Was she living with the consequences of her actions? Was she consumed by guilt? Or had her ambition found a new, less destructive path? Eleanor tried to close off that part of her mind, to sever the emotional tie, but it was impossible. A mother's bond, even when shattered by betrayal, was a tenacious, enduring thread. She would always wonder. She would always carry the weight of that profound, unresolved loss. The experience had taught Eleanor a harsh, undeniable truth, that the greatest betrayals often come from those closest to us, from those we trust implicitly, and that some wounds, though they may scar over, never truly heal, leaving behind a profound and lingering emptiness, a chilling testament to the unseen costs of deception. The new house, though beautiful, remained subtly different. It was a home, yes, but it was also a monument to the unbridgeable chasm that had opened between a mother and her child, a silent, daily reminder of the daughter who had sold her very foundation, leaving her with an absent deed and a heart forever marked by the weight of unspoken grief and unforgiven betrayal. The silence in the home was now a profound echo of the silence between a mother and her only child, a silence that screamed louder than any noise. Chapter 7. The lingering echoes. Years passed, blurring into a quiet, dignified routine for Eleanor. Her bungalow, once a stark reminder of displacement, had slowly transformed into a true home, imbued with her unique spirit and filled with the comfort of new memories. Her garden flourished, a riot of colors and scents that brought her immense joy. Her work at the library was fulfilling, and her new circle of friends provided warmth and companionship. Yet, despite the peace she cultivated, the echoes of Clara's betrayal lingered, subtle but persistent. Eleanor had learned to live with the wound, to carry the burden of the unseen costs, but it was never truly gone. It manifested in small ways, a momentary hesitation before fully trusting a new acquaintance, a slight flinch when a news story about financial fraud or elder abuse flashed across the screen, a deep, silent ache on holidays when the absence of her only child felt most acute. She often thought about the concept of home. For so long, it had been a physical structure, a sanctuary. Now she understood it was something far more ephemeral, a state of being, a feeling of belonging, a place where one's heart found peace. And while her bungalow offered that peace, a piece of her heart would forever reside in the ghost of her old home, the one sold from under her. The absent deed remained a silent testament to that fundamental loss, a permanent shadow on her past. Eleanor never heard from Clara, no letter, no phone call, no attempt at reconciliation. The silence from her daughter was absolute, a chilling testament to Clara's inability or unwillingness to face the consequences of her actions, or perhaps the depth of her own shame. Eleanor sometimes wondered if Clara had rebuilt her life elsewhere, if her ambition had found a new outlet, or if she was consumed by regret. But these thoughts were fleeting, quickly suppressed. She had learned that dwelling on what could not be changed was a drain on her spirit. She focused on the present, on the small joys of her daily life. She traveled occasionally, visiting old friends, exploring new places. She cultivated her passion for photography, capturing the beauty of her garden, the changing seasons, the quiet moments of everyday life. Her photographs, imbued with a deep sense of resilience and quiet observation, became a personal journal, a visual narrative of her journey of healing. One crisp autumn morning, as the leaves outside her bungalow turned fiery reds and golds, Eleanor received an unexpected letter. It was from a law firm she didn't recognize, based in a small town far from Portland. She opened it with a sense of trepidation, her heart fluttering with an old, familiar anxiety. The letter was formal, concise. It stated that as the closest living relative, Eleanor Vance was named as the sole beneficiary of a small estate. The deceased, Clara Eleanor Vance. Eleanor's hand, holding the letter, dropped to her lap. Clara, deceased. The world tilted again, but this time the shock was different. Not betrayal, but a complex, profound sorrow. Clara was gone, her only child, a woman who had stolen her home, shattered her trust, yet who was still irrevocably her daughter. The letter went on to explain the circumstances. Clara had been living a quiet life, far from Portland, working in a small independent real estate office, completely out of the public eye. She had died suddenly, peacefully, in her sleep, from an unexpected medical condition. She had left no will, no spouse, no children. Her few modest possessions, a small bank account, were now Eleanor's, and then a final paragraph. The law firm had found a single, small package, sealed and addressed to Eleanor, among Clara's personal effects. It was included with the letter. Eleanor looked down at the package. It was a simple brown paper parcel, tied with a thin string. Her name, in Clara's familiar handwriting, was scrawled across it. her heart hammered against her ribs. Years of silence, years of estrangement, and now this, a final posthumous message. With trembling hands, Eleanor untied the string. Inside, nestled in layers of tissue paper, was a single object. It was a small, exquisitely carved wooden box. Not the mahogany one, not the birch one. This one was made of light, almost translucent maple, smooth and cool to the touch. It had no clasp, no lock, no visible seams, and on its lid, simply, beautifully etched, was a single word: home. Eleanor's breath hitched. Home. She tried to open it, searching for a hidden mechanism, remembering her mother's cryptic riddles. But this box was different. As her fingers traced the etched word, she felt a profound sense of peace emanate from the wood. It wasn't a puzzle. It was a gesture. And then she saw it. On the underside of the box, carved almost imperceptibly into the maple grain, were two dates: Clara's birth date and the date of her passing, and beneath them a tiny, deeply etched symbol, a single delicate maple leaf. Eleanor remembered the maple leaf. It was a motif Clara had used in her childhood drawings, a symbol of growth, of change, of enduring strength, and it was the very tree under which Clara had pulled over the car that devastating day, years ago, to deliver the news that shattered Eleanor's world. The tree that had witnessed the betrayal, and now it was a symbol of her final, silent communication. Eleanor realized the box wasn't meant to be opened physically. It was a vessel for an intangible message, a final, silent confession from beyond the grave. It was Clara's absent deed, not of property, but of a broken trust, a profound remorse, a final plea for understanding. And the word home, etched on its lid, was not about a physical place, but about a longing for belonging, for connection, for the home she had destroyed. Eleanor held the box to her chest, tears streaming down her face, not tears of anger or bitterness, but tears of profound, complex sorrow, and a strange, unexpected tenderness. Clara was gone. The relationship, shattered so brutally, could never be mended in life. But this box, this final, poignant gesture, was a whisper of remorse, a fragile thread of communication across the ultimate divide. The lingering echoes of betrayal still remained, a permanent scar. But now, amidst those echoes, the new, softer sound began to emerge, the faint, resonant hum of forgiveness, a possibility that in death Clara had finally offered, and Eleanor, in her enduring love, had finally, tearfully received. The final, absent deed was not a document of theft, but a posthumous plea for reconciliation, a silent testament to the enduring, complex, and often heartbreaking tapestry of love between a mother and her child. Chapter 8: The Unveiling of the Maple Box. The maple box, simple yet profoundly symbolic, became Eleanor's most cherished possession. It never opened, but its smooth, cool surface, bearing the etched word home and the maple leaf, became a constant source of quiet contemplation. It was a tangible link to Clara, a silent dialogue across the chasm of death and decades of estrangement. Eleanor kept the box on her bedside table, a comforting presence in her quiet nights. She would trace the etched word home with her finger, reflecting on its manifold meanings. It was Clara's longing for home, perhaps the home she had destroyed for her mother, or the home within herself she had never truly found. It was also Eleanor's unwavering definition of home, not just a place, but a feeling of security, love, and belonging, a feeling that Clara had so ruthlessly taken away, yet perhaps in her final act tried to return. The news of Clara's death brought a complex wave of emotions to Eleanor's small circle of friends. There was initial shock, then a profound sadness for Eleanor, who had lost her only child, regardless of their fractured relationship. Some expressed hope that this might bring Eleanor a form of closure. Others still harbored resentment towards Clara for her past actions. Eleanor, however, chose to focus on the quiet grace of the maple box, on the message of remorse and unspoken regret she felt emanating from it. She rarely spoke of Clara's death or of the maple box. It was too personal, too raw. But its presence in her life brought a new dimension to her healing journey. The raw anger and bitterness she had carried for so long began to soften, replaced by a profound, complex sorrow that allowed for a glimmer of understanding. Clara had made a terrible mistake, a devastating choice driven by ambition, and perhaps a desperate, misguided attempt to secure her mother's future. But now, in death, she had offered a silent apology, a profound expression of what she had come to understand. Eleanor often thought of the day Clara had pulled over under the maple tree, delivering the news that shattered her world. That tree, a silent witness to betrayal, had now provided the wood for Clara's final symbolic offering. The maple leaf, once a childhood doodle, had become a powerful emblem of remorse and remembrance. It was a testament to the intricate, often heartbreaking, connections that define human relationships, even in their most fractured states. As the years advanced, Eleanor found herself pondering the nature of forgiveness. She had fought for justice, and she had received it. Clara had faced consequences, but forgiveness, she realized, was not about condoning the act. It was about releasing herself from the burden of anger, from the corrosive grip of bitterness. It was about finding a way to make peace with the past, not for Clara's sake, but for her own. The maple box became a catalyst for this process. It was a constant reminder that Clara, despite her flaws and her devastating actions, was still her daughter, a part of her own being, and that, even in death, there was a profound human need for connection, for understanding, for a final, unspoken plea for grace. One quiet afternoon, sitting in her garden, the sunlight warm on her face, Eleanor held the maple box. She felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet acceptance. She realized that the home etched on the box was not just Clara's longing for connection, but also her own enduring definition of home, a place of love, forgiveness, and unconditional belonging, even in the face of immense pain. She decided to make a final gesture, a quiet act of completion. She commissioned a small, elegant wooden plaque, etched with Clara's name and dates, and placed it beneath a thriving maple tree she had planted in a secluded corner of her garden. It was a private memorial, a space for remembrance, a final resting place for the lingering questions and unspoken sorrows. Eleanor continued to live a rich, full life, surrounded by friends, books, and the beauty of her garden. The trauma of the absent deed, of the stolen home, had irrevocably altered her, but it had also made her stronger, more resilient, and ultimately, more profoundly empathetic to the complexities of human nature. The profound pain of betrayal had given way to a deeper understanding of forgiveness, not as an act of weakness, but as an act of profound self-liberation. The maple box remained by her bedside, a silent, enduring testament to the complex tapestry of a mother's love, a daughter's ambition, and the profound, bittersweet journey of reconciliation that, for some, can only truly begin when the final, absent deed of life is finally unveiled. The echoes of Clara's life, once tinged with betrayal, now resonated with a quiet, profound hum of a daughter finally at peace, and a mother who had, at last, truly found her way back home. Chapter 9. The Garden of Shared Solace. Eleanor's garden, already a haven, took on a new significance after Clara's passing and the unveiling of the maple box. It became a living memorial, the space where the complexities of love, loss, and forgiveness were cultivated alongside the roses and hydrangeas. The small maple tree she had planted in Clara's memory thrived, its leaves turning a brilliant crimson each autumn, a vibrant testament to life's enduring cycles. Eleanor spent more time than ever in her garden. It was a place of quiet communion, where she could feel a sense of connection, not just to the natural world, but to the spirits of those she had loved and lost. She would often sit on a weathered wooden bench beneath the maple tree, holding the smooth maple box, reflecting on the profound, often painful lessons life had taught her. The fear that had once consumed her when she thought of Clara's betrayal had long dissipated, replaced by a more nuanced understanding of human frailty and the power of redemption, even in death. Her friends, observing her quiet peace, often joined her in the garden. They knew the contours of her story, the devastation Clara had wrought. But they also saw the profound healing Eleanor had achieved. The garden became a place of shared solace, where conversations flowed freely, often touching on themes of family, forgiveness, and the resilience of the human spirit. Eleanor, once a private and guarded woman, found herself sharing more deeply, her vulnerability becoming a source of strength and connection for others. She joined a bereavement support group, cautiously at first, then with increasing openness. She didn't recount the full, painful details of Clara's betrayal, but she spoke of profound loss, of the complexities of a mother-daughter bond, and of the long, arduous journey towards forgiveness. Her quiet wisdom and deep empathy resonated with the other members, many of whom carried their own unspoken griefs and fractured relationships. She found a new purpose in offering comfort and understanding, drawing on her own journey to illuminate the path for others. Eleanor also reconnected with elements of her past that brought her joy. She started a small, personal project, archiving old neighborhood histories, collecting photographs and oral testimonies from longtime residents. It was a way to preserve the stories of homes and the lives lived within them, a quiet, profound counterpoint to the loss of her own home. She focused on the human element, the emotional architecture of a community, finding solace in the enduring narratives of others. The absent deed of her former home, once a symbol of betrayal, now held a different meaning. It represented the transformative power of loss. Her home had been taken, yes, but in its place, she had built a new foundation of emotional resilience, self-discovery, and a profound capacity for forgiveness. She realized that true ownership wasn't about a piece of paper, but about the imprints left on her heart, the memories cherished, and the lessons learned. The relationship with her former property was still a complex one. She never drove past her old house. She couldn't bring herself to see what Willow Creek Properties had done, the soulless townhouses that had undoubtedly replaced her cherished home. It was a boundary she set for herself, a necessary act of protection for her healing heart. The past was in the past, and her focus was on the present and the future she was building for herself. One day, while working in her garden, a young woman approached her fence. She was holding a large, professional camera, and her face was earnest, almost shy. "Excuse me," she began. "I'm a photographer. I'm doing a series on historical gardens in Portland, and your garden is truly beautiful. Would you mind if I took some photographs?" Eleanor smiled, a genuine, warm smile. She had always loved the idea of capturing beauty, of preserving moments. "Of course, dear," she replied. "You're welcome. Just be gentle with the roses." As the young photographer moved through the garden, capturing its vibrant beauty, Eleanor watched her, a quiet contentment settling over her. The woman's passion, her dedication to her art, reminded Eleanor of Clara, of the ambition she had once admired. But this time, there was no shadow, no fear, only a gentle recognition of shared human spirit, of lives intertwined in unexpected ways. The garden, with its thriving plants and symbolic trees, bloomed under the vast open sky. It was a living testament to Eleanor's journey, a profound statement that even from the deepest wounds, new beauty could emerge, and that the seeds of forgiveness, once sown, could eventually yield a harvest of profound peace. The absent deed, the stolen home, had led her not to perpetual bitterness, but to a deeper, more profound understanding of life's intricate tapestry, where sorrow and solace were inextricably woven, and where love, even in its most broken forms, found a way to echo, enduringly, in the quiet heart of a woman who had at last truly come home. Chapter 10. The Resonance of Remembrance. Years melted into a tapestry of quiet grace for Eleanor. Her bungalow was now undeniably her home, not a replacement, but a continuation of her life's narrative. The garden, lush and vibrant, hummed with a profound sense of peace, each bloom a testament to resilience. Eleanor, now in her late 70s, had cultivated not just flowers, but a deep inner tranquility, a wisdom born from profound loss and the arduous journey of forgiveness. The maple box, Clara's final unspoken plea, remained by her bedside. Its smooth, warm surface was etched with the passage of time, just as Eleanor's heart had been etched by sorrow, and then, eventually, by a profound, gentle understanding. The word home, on its lid, resonated with new layers of meaning. It wasn't just a physical place, or even Clara's yearning for belonging. It was the sacred space within Eleanor herself, where healing had taken root, where memories, both joyful and painful, found their rightful integrated place. Eleanor had come to understand that the absent deed, the legal document that had marked the theft of her physical home, was, in a larger sense, the catalyst for the gift of an unconditional deed to her own spiritual and emotional freedom. By facing the betrayal, pursuing justice, and ultimately choosing forgiveness, she had reclaimed not property, but her very essence. She no longer allowed the past to define her in terms of victimhood, but rather as a testament to profound human strength. Her connection with David, her ex-husband, had blossomed into a rare, comfortable friendship, built on shared history and the quiet understanding of mutual pain. They would often sit in Eleanor's garden, reminiscing about the early days of their marriage, the joy of Clara's childhood, carefully omitting the painful years of estrangement, focusing instead on the threads of love that had always connected them, however strained. David marveled at Eleanor's serenity, recognizing the profound work she had done within herself. Clara's memory, once a source of searing pain and anger, had mellowed into a complex, bittersweet tenderness. Eleanor allowed herself to remember the good times, Clara's bright laughter as a child, her fierce intelligence, her moments of unexpected kindness. The knowledge that Clara, in her final act, had sought to convey remorse, to offer a silent apology, provided a profound, quiet comfort. It was not a full reconciliation, for that was impossible in life, but it was a form of peace, a recognition of a bond that, despite everything, had never truly been severed at its core. The maple tree in her garden, planted years ago, now cast a significant shadow, its roots deep and firm. It was a living monument, a quiet witness to Eleanor's journey of transformation. She often sat beneath its branches, a physical manifestation of the rootedness she had regained. The security she had rebuilt, not in bricks and mortar, but in the unwavering resilience of her spirit. Eleanor continued her volunteer work at the library, her presence a quiet, reassuring force. She was known for her calm demeanor, her listening ear, and her ability to offer comfort without judgment. She had truly become a beacon of strength for others, navigating their own complexities of grief and loss, sharing her wisdom not through grand pronouncements, but through the quiet power of her own lived experience. She had finally learned that forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past or forgetting the pain. It was about acknowledging the wound, honoring the suffering, and then, slowly, deliberately, choosing to release the bitterness that bound her to it. It was about choosing to live fully in the present, to embrace the beauty of what remained, and to understand that even in the most broken narratives, there were always threads of enduring love waiting to be rediscovered. One sunny afternoon, as Eleanor sat in her garden, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, she picked up a well-worn copy of a classic novel. As she turned the pages, a small, faded photograph slipped out. It was an old, candid snapshot of Clara, perhaps in her late teens, sitting on the porch of Eleanor's old house, laughing, her head thrown back, completely unburdened. It was a picture of pure, unadulterated joy. Eleanor smiled, a soft, profound smile, tears pricking at her eyes, but not tears of sorrow. These were tears of remembrance, of love, and of a deep, abiding peace. She traced Clara's laughing face with her finger, then placed the photograph carefully back in the book. The absent deed of her former home had led her down a path of immense pain, but it had also guided her to a revelation far greater than any property: the boundless capacity of the human heart to heal, to understand, and to ultimately find a profound, liberating peace, even in the most broken of narratives. The echoes of betrayal had faded, replaced by the gentle, resonant hum of enduring love, a powerful testament to a life rebuilt, a spirit unburdened, and a heart finally, truly at home.